Imagine this for a second. You're the first king of a new nation. You have power, you have an army, you have sons, heirs ready to take your place. You think your line is secured for life. And then, one by one, everything falls apart. Not just your kingdom, not just your army, but your own bloodline. This is the story of King Saul and how his sons died because of his disobedience. It begins with a man who was chosen by God and ends with a family destroyed by war, betrayal, and blood guilt.
To understand why Saul's sons had to die, you have to understand the man who made Saul king in the first place, Samuel. Samuel was the last judge of Israel and the bridge between God and his people. When the nation demanded a king, Samuel was the one who anointed Saul. At the beginning, it worked. Samuel was the voice, Saul was the throne. But Saul had a fatal flaw that would cost him everything: insecurity. On the outside, Saul looked like a king, tall, impressive, commanding. But inside, he felt small, like a man who had no right to be there.
So small that when he was first chosen, he literally hid among the baggage during his own coronation. Think about that. He came from the smallest tribe in the nation, and he never really outgrew that. And deep down, he never believed he was fit enough to sit on that throne. So he became something dangerous, a people pleaser. He didn't lead the crowd, he needed the crowd in their approval to feel like a real king. So when the war with the Amalekites came and God gave the order to destroy everything, Saul's need for approval took over. He kept the best loot, he spared the enemy king, and when he was confronted, he did not repent. He made excuses, he blamed his soldiers. God gave Saul a direct command: destroy everything. No exceptions, no trophies, no mercy. It was a test of obedience, and Saul failed. When the prophet Samuel confronted him, the verdict was simple: because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. This statement from Samuel left Saul scared down to his bones. 1 Samuel chapter 15 verse 27 to 28 reads, "As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, 'The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you.'" That moment was not symbolic. It was a sentence, a legal eviction notice. The protection over Saul's bloodline was ripped away. From that moment on, Saul's sons were not just fighting Philistines, they were fighting a kingdom that had already rejected them. From that day on, Samuel never saw Saul again. Saul stayed on the throne, but he was no longer chosen. A king in position, but rejected in spirit. A dead king walking. And somewhere in the background, another man was rising: David. While Saul's sons were preparing to rule, a peasant named David was stealing the hearts of the nation, and every victory David won was another nail in Saul's coffin. David wasn't just a rival, he was a replacement, and Saul knew it. Years later, everything Samuel said is beginning to come true. The Philistines are gathering. Saul's army is shaking, and God no longer answers him through dreams, prophets, or signs. Saul is trapped. So in his panic, he turns to the one place he had forbidden everyone else to go. He goes looking for the dead. But what greeted him was not just a random ghost. It is Samuel's spirit, the same man Saul betrayed. Saul begs for help, but Samuel's spirit is cold. He tells him the truth. God hasn't just left you, he's become your enemy, and the message has not changed. Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me. No strategy, no escape, just judgment. The tear in that robe years ago,
has finally reached its conclusion.
The next day is chaos. The battle on Mount Gilboa is not just a defeat, it is a slaughter. The Philistines have the upper hand. Israel's army is scattered and trapped on rough ground, and the royal family is right in the middle of it. Saul's sons are not children, they are grown men, warriors, princes, the future of Israel's first royal house, and one by one they fall. First is Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's eldest son, and in another life he should have been the next king of Israel. He is brave, respected, and proven in battle. But Jonathan already knew the truth. The throne wasn't his anymore, and somehow he accepted it. Jonathan is also a family man. He leaves behind a son, Mephibosheth, the crippled prince, a child who will grow up without his father's protection and carry the consequences of this collapse for the rest of his life. But on Mount Gilboa, none of that matters. The Philistine archers rain down arrows. Jonathan is struck in the violence of the battle, and he dies where he stands, not in a palace, but on a blood-soaked hill beside his father, whose throne he will never inherit. Next is Abinadab, and unlike Jonathan, history barely gives him a voice. But do not mistake silence for weakness. Abinadab was one of Saul's sons, and by this point in the war, he was old enough to stand in battle beside the king's forces. He is part of the royal line, a son of the house, a man expected to fight for his family's survival. But the battlefield does not care about rank. When the Philistine assault breaks through Israel's defenses, the fighting turns close and brutal. Abinadab is overwhelmed in the collapse. He is cut down in the storm of battle, swallowed by the same disaster that is devouring the whole line of Saul. He dies not as a legend, but as a casualty of a kingdom coming apart. Then comes Malchi-shua, the youngest of the three. If Jonathan carries the weight of destiny and Abinadab carries the burden of military duty, Malchi-shua carries something else entirely: youth. He is the youngest son, the one with the least time, the least record, and probably the least chance to escape what is coming. And that is what makes his death so tragic. He is not remembered for a speech. He is not remembered for a victory. He is remembered because he died in the same collapse as his brothers. As the Philistines advance and Israel's line breaks apart, Malchi-shua is struck down in the rout. He is lost in the panic, crushed by the force of a battle Israel cannot win. 3 sons, 3 heirs, all gone on the same mountain. Saul sees it all. His sons are dead. His army is broken. His dynasty is finished. And in one final act of desperation, he falls on his own sword rather than be captured by the enemy. The first generation of Saul's royal house is over in a single day. While Saul and his sons are being slaughtered on Mount Gilboa, David is 80 miles south in Ziklag. He is there in exile, recovering from his own battle against the Amalekites, the very people Saul was commanded to destroy years ago, but spared out of insecurity. 3 days later, a messenger stumbles into David's camp, holding Saul's crown and armlet. He claims he found the king dying on the mountain, and at Saul's own request, delivered the final blow. The man is an Amalekite. He expects a reward. Instead, he gets a death sentence. But the curse does not stop there. The battlefield took 3. Betrayal will take the 4th, and an ancient debt is still coming for the rest.
After Saul dies, Israel does not immediately unite under David. The kingdom fractures. In the north, Saul's surviving son Ish-bosheth is pushed onto the throne by Abner, Saul's powerful commander. And one important detail matters here. Ish-bosheth is one of Saul's royal sons, not one of the later sons connected to Rizpah. He belongs to the first line, the line that is supposed to hold Saul's throne together after Gilboa. But this is not real power. This is survival. Ish-bosheth becomes the last desperate gasp of a dying name. He is not really ruling a kingdom, he is surviving inside a collapsing one, knowing every hallway could hide an assassin and every servant could be a threat. He rules for about 2 years, 2 unstable years of tension, fear, and civil conflict. He does not rule because he is strong, he rules because Israel is divided. And that is the problem. In a kingdom built on force, weak kings do not last. Ish-bosheth does not die on a battlefield. He dies in his own house. At noon, while he is resting, 2 of his captains, Rechab and Baanah, enter his home and murder him in cold blood. They stab him in the stomach and then cut off his head, carrying it as though they have accomplished something noble. They think they are bringing David a trophy. Instead, they are bringing David proof of their own evil. David does not reward them. He orders their execution, because even in war there are limits, and murder inside a king's own house crosses the line. Ish-bosheth dies not because he was powerful, but because his kingdom was already falling apart from within. Years pass. David is now established on the throne, but then a famine comes to the land and refuses to leave. 3 years of hunger, 3 years of suffering. David, who is now king, runs to God for a solution, and the answer is devastating. This is not random. This is not about the weather. This is judgment. Because Saul had committed a terrible act against the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites were a neighboring people who had made a treaty with Israel long before Saul's reign. They were supposed to be protected, but Saul broke that covenant and attacked them. Years later, that broken promise came back as blood guilt, and the famine in Israel exposed the cost of Saul's violence. Justice demands a price. This is where the curse moves beyond the battlefield and into the next generation. And this is where people get confused, so let's make it clear. There are 2 different men named Mephibosheth in this story. Jonathan's son Mephibosheth is the crippled prince, the survivor David later spares. Rizpah's son Mephibosheth is the sacrifice, the one handed over in the famine to settle Saul's blood debt. Same name, different generations, different branches of the family. And now the blood debt has come for both lines of Saul's house. Among the descendants handed over are 2 sons of Saul by his concubine Rizpah, Armoni and Mephibosheth, the sacrifice. These are not battlefield deaths. These are the deaths of men pulled into the consequences of a father's crime. They are executed and left exposed on the hill as payment for Saul's blood guilt. The story is no longer about military defeat. It is about an ancient debt finally being collected. Their mother, Rizpah, sits beside the bodies. She does not walk away. For weeks, for months, she guards the dead from birds by day and wild animals by night, refusing to let her sons be consumed and forgotten. Because even if she cannot save their lives, she will protect their dignity. Her grief becomes a witness against the cruelty of the age. And yet, amid all this destruction, one son survives. Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, the crippled prince. When the news of the defeat at Gilboa reaches the household, panic breaks out. His nurse flees in fear, drops him, and the child is crippled in both feet for the rest of his life. He grows up hidden, forgotten, and wounded by history before he even understands it. But unlike the others, he is not killed, because David remembers his covenant with Jonathan. So the surviving son of the fallen prince, Mephibosheth, the crippled prince, is brought to the king's table and given a place to live. In the middle of all the death, one life is preserved by mercy.
So this is the story of Saul's sons: Jonathan, the noble prince; Abinadab, the forgotten warrior; Malchi-shua, the youngest son caught in the collapse; Ish-bosheth, the last desperate gasp of a dying name betrayed in his own house; Armoni and Saul's son by Rizpah, executed to settle the blood debt of their father's sins; and Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, crippled but spared. It is a story of war. It is a story of betrayal. It is a story of judgment. But more than anything, it is a story about what happens when a king disobeys God and the consequences echo through his entire family. Did God punish the sons for the father's sins, or were they simply the collateral damage of one man's ego? That is the terror of generational consequence. One man's rebellion, one kingdom's collapse, and a family forever marked by the choices of its father.